As a Christian combative, Scripture is your arsenal. And while you should definitely know everything in your arsenal and know when and how to use it, there are certain things that hit a little bit harder than others. There are certain words or phrases or prayers, when taken even in isolation, pack that gospel punch a little bit harder than other individual words and phrases. So your 50 caliber gospel word of the day is Tetelestai. Let's get into it. All right, this word Tetelestai. What does it mean? Why is it important? Why is it the 50 caliber gospel word of the day? Well, Tetelestai is a word maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but you almost certainly know part of the word. Telos. Now, telos is a Greek word in itself. It's a root word, but you probably know it from something like the word telescope. A telescope is one of these extending devices. It's like a tube that you look through and you can see far away. You can scope from far away. And it's this device that has these segments that extend until it's fully useful. I've got the cameras on a tripod right now. The tripod, it extends. It's got these segments and it extends. It's a telescoping tripod. Once it reaches that final stage, then I can put the camera on it and I can use it. Once you have a telescope fully extended, then you can look through it and you can use it. The purpose of the device is accomplished when it is fully telescoped, when it has reached its telos. So the word Tetelestai has to do something with telos, reaching an ultimate conclusion, an ultimate point where its use can finally be enjoyed, right? So the word Tetelestai, the word telos is used a few times in Greek. It's a fairly common word, although there are times when it has a very specific meaning, like the meaning of life. What is the telos of life? But there are only 2 times in Scripture where the word Tetelestai is used. They're both in John chapter 19, verses 28 and 30. In verse 28, Jesus is thirsty. He says, I thirst. And this was to fulfill the Scriptures. Tetelestai means, in this case, to fulfill. This was to fulfill the Scriptures. And then, of course, they bring him the wine vinegar. And he drinks it. And then Jesus says that powerful word again. He says it out loud. He says, Tetelestai. And he yields up his spirit. Jesus says, it is finished. Now, this is a very, very powerful word. Because if you think all the way back to the beginning of Scripture, if you think all the way back to Genesis, you have this problem where you have Adam and Eve. They sin, they're kicked out of the garden, all the sin corrupts the earth, and it's just trouble from then on, right? They screw up everything for everybody. Thanks a lot, Adam and Eve. But there's a promise of redemption. In Genesis chapter 3, there's this first promise of redemption that eventually someone will come and set everything right. Well, let's fast forward to the New Testament. Jesus is born, Jesus grows up a bit, Jesus starts his gospel ministry. He starts going around, he collects disciples, he teaches people, and he eventually trains these disciples. He catechizes them, and he puts them through seminary, basically. He trains them to go and be pastors. But there's one event that stands out in particular, and this is the crucifixion event. In this event, Jesus he's on the cross, and he's doing something, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, once in an eternity event on the cross. Everything in Scripture culminates to this final point when Jesus is on the cross. All of this sin that has been corrupting and hurting people, all of this sin that has been causing people to have this debt, this separation from God that needs to be addressed. Finally, you have this God-man Jesus. He's a man, so he can pay for the sins of man. And he's God, so he can pay for the sins of all men. And he's this perfect sacrifice, and everything lines up perfectly. And Jesus is on the cross, and he says that word, Tetelestai. It is finished. He yields up his spirit, for nobody can take God's spirit from him, but he yields up his spirit. He yields himself over to death itself. And in so doing, he pays for the debt of mankind. Tetelestai is present tense. It is finished. That's very important for you to remember. It's not Jesus saying, well, there's a few more steps. You have to do a few more things after this. I paid for some of the sin, but you've got to go and pay for the rest of your sin on your own. No, it's not that at all. It is finished. It's this singular point, this singular event in history where it's all finally sorted out. Jesus finally pays for it all. He finally defeats sin, death, and the devil there on that cross. And all that's left is for this grace, for this wonderful thing to be delivered to us. And it is delivered to us. It's given to us in faith that we receive through Scripture and baptism and through the Lord's Supper, these means of grace. But that singular point, that it is finished point, that's when everything changes. That's when everything is set right. It is finished, he says. Tetelestai. That's a lot of gospel to pack into one word. This was your 50 caliber gospel word of the day. Tetelestai.